Derek Taylor, host of the SportsCage, and is it color commentary? Play-by-play.
Yeah.
Saskatchewan Roughriders. Thanks for joining us. Can you first give Reed a hard time for his Edmonton affiliation here now?
Well, one, they don't have a nickname, so that's bad. Two, their final list wasn't the one I wanted. I wanted the Edmonton Endowed, because what American wouldn't come up? I get to play for a team called the Endowed. Hey, what team do you play for? The Endowed. They didn't go for it. Reed, that's total crap. They didn't go for it. Come on.
I know. Dave, friend of the show, Dave Campbell, beat you onto the show, Edmonton color analyst. And so I said, I got to throw my hat with Dave. And there's some XFL guys that are making their way to Edmonton. So we are excited about that.
Just between us, with what Edmonton did between free agency in the last couple of off seasons, Edmonton is going to be good this season. I don't know where I'll have them when my power rankings come out, when the season looks on the horizon, but Edmonton might contend to be first in the West in the regular season.
I like that.
They've done some really nice stuff. Oh,
Reed's already amped. Also, I listened to your show after the whole Arash thing, and I thought it was very. You guys kind of were the only outlet I thought that like kind of saw where we were coming from, and I've gone over that numerous times, and I've been like, I could have hit him with the Arena Football League and been boom. And that would have been, the argument to win that thing. But I was like, great. Somebody up there is finally kind of understanding like our viewpoint on things. So I do appreciate that.
I want to profess my undying love for Arash Madani, because he's fantastic. He's connected within the league, and he is not afraid to set things on fire. I love that about Arash. There are just some parts of his argument that you go, what's successful and what's a failure? If you want to say every American league that's not the NFL has failed, is the Arena League running from 1987 to 2019, 33 seasons? Is that really a failure? Sure, it's not in business, but for 33 years, here's another version of football outside of the NCAA, outside of the NFL, that made its way through in America. So to me, that's not a failure. Maybe I'm a big softie, but not everything is a failure just because it did die off at one point.
I totally agree with that. We've gone back and forth with a lot of the 3-down guys, and that it's like, well, does it exist right now? Then it's a failure. And you're like, well, I don't really know if that's the bar that I would set for anything. I mean, lots of things run their course, and for a variety of reasons. But just because something doesn't exist right now today does not necessarily mean it's a failure. So.
Was Friends the TV show a failure? No, it was on the air for like 11, 12 seasons, and then it had to go away.
Yeah, what a great example, right? Seinfeld. I'll watch 2 episodes of Seinfeld at some point today. That thing went off the air 22 years ago. I forget what it was, 98, 23 years ago. Yeah, but that's the narrative that we drive. That's it's just the NFL, and the NFL is a behemoth, and you can't really compete September to February when the Super Bowl happens. The people are insane about the draft. So many people outside the NFL make so much money just talking about the draft all year round. But there's not a reason why, when the NFL isn't playing football games, another league done properly can't prosper. The Arena League is gone, but if you went back and investigated it, I'm sure there are several inflection points where you went, if they'd done this better, they might still be around here in 2021, packing people into the Alaris Center in Fargo, North Dakota, or Grand Forks, whichever one that is. Like, come on. Like, there's room. There's room. And I loved Arash with the twice failed XFL. That's the only way he would refer to it. I get it, but I don't think that it's gone under twice has particularly anything to do with what will come in 2022. Or whatever. I don't think the past performance indicates future performance in this particular case.
Completely agree. We're in a once in a lifetime situation, once in a generational situation, once in 100 years.
Yeah.
And you can't really say it's twice failed when you look at that. That's clear. So.
Well, and the sins of not even the father, but the sins of like the weird great uncle from the 1999 XFL. You're putting those on the son? I don't think so.
Just curious. I was listening to Rod this morning. You know, we're obviously going to be covering the spring league tonight. Are you watching any of that? Is that on your radar at all?
Not at all. Okay. No, as a football fan, I'm kind of super heavy on the CFL. I'm heavy on the NFL, and then I saw about 30 minutes of college football this year. So no, if there's some CFL player that I remember that shows up in the spring league, I may want to poke my head into some highlight. But no, I'm just super. I just go very deep on the CFL and try to go deep on the NFL as well.
Did you watch the XFL back in 2019, 2020?
I watched some of it, yeah, for sure, because it's football, right? Ultimately, it's football, and we have a CFL that's based on not being the very top level of football, and yet it's still awesome, right? So I did check in on some XFL, because the other part of it is there were CFL names that made their way down there, and you went, oh, I wonder if I'm going to see this guy. Will I see Derek Dennis? I love that guy. Oh, Grey Cup champion. I got to see Double D, and I ultimately didn't. But there was a curiosity. It wasn't around for long enough because March came and blew us all away.
Yep. In terms of all this, merger talk, or maybe Super League talk, or maybe interleague talk, what would you like to see the CFL keep around in terms of rules, in terms of those kinds of things?
I am one of the few in Canada who will say, whatever it is, the rouge has got to go. The single for the punt, that thing's got to go. I've always hated that. You miss a field goal, you blow it through the back of the end zone. Here's a loser point. No, I don't know. Nobody wants that. That one's got to go. What do I want to see? I'm not so attached to the rules that I played high school football with. I like them. I like the CFL is different. I like 3 downs. Waggling, sprinting full speed toward the line of scrimmage at the snap, to me is I don't know why the NFL doesn't do it. Can you imagine what some of their guys could do with the waggle from the slot? Just forget it. It could be uncoverable, and it could be 60-50, but then defenses would respond. So I'd love to see the waggle stick around, unlimited pre-snap motion, have that stick around. Other than that, I'm not so tied to 3 downs other than it promotes more passing. It's a 70% passing league in great part because of the 3 downs, right? You don't have time to waste a first down by running the football as often as you do in the NFL. So I wouldn't mind that one. I'm just not so tied to the rules as they are as the reason I love Canadian football. I love Canadian football, I don't know, because I love the game. I love football. I love that it happens in my hometown. I love that it happens in all these other towns that I love. I take what TSN's Farhan Lalji said on my show one day. He said, the Canadian football that I want to protect is football being played in Canada. Maybe it said the football that he loves is football played in Canada. And to me, it's just a chance for young people, young boys and girls, to play and experience football and have those great sports experiences I had. Whatever form it's like, I'm probably cool with that. I could be talked into wanting to join the protected side and keep this around, but honestly, I just want football played in Canada for me.
Have you been as shocked as I guess I have been, and I'll speak for Paul too, as we have been with just the divisiveness that has come from, I mean, it really has become like this Canadian culture, like conscious of like, well, no, this is, Paul and I were having a conversation with the gentleman last night online, and he's like, I am pro like Canada. It does not matter, right? Like we don't care. I mean, have you, and obviously, you host a radio show, you hear from people, you talk with, lots more people than we do. Have you been shocked just with how divisive it feels like it has gotten?
On protecting Canada, no, not really, right? Because so much of our broadcasting is set up on protecting Canada. I remember when I was a kid, I would be watching Thursday nights on NBC where Cheers and Night Court and then whatever stuff they would put before that. And I would think, why does a Canadian TV show this? This stuff is hilarious. And as you grow, you go like, oh, right, because American culture and American influence would absolutely overwhelm Canada. Population 10 times greater. There's no end of American entertainment that would absolutely come in and just blow ours out of the water because we could get it cheaper. We could put it on TV for less price than creating stuff. And then that would absolutely stifle, Canadian entertainers. So I'm not surprised by that. We do need to protect the incredible talents that we do have here in Canada. And yes, they may leave to go to America at some point, but they need to be grown and fostered here. We need our kids to grow up believing that I could be the next Brent Butt of corner gas. I could be the next Nickelback. I could be whatever. We do need to protect that. So I'm not surprised that people are, protective of the CFL. We have great people who can do great things up here too if they're given the opportunity. But America can be so overwhelming. Sometimes our newscasts are, what happened in America today? What did Donald Trump do today? That was 4 years of Canadian newscasts. And there's not stuff happening in Canada. So it does. I believe it does need to be fought for sure.
On that note, when you talk about kids getting involved with the game, we've both questioned the marketing tactics in the CFL and how to grow the game and keep the youth involved. What do you think they're doing wrong in terms of those marketing things to bring the youth in and have them watch?
That's such a good question because it's one that they've struggled with for the longest time, right? Like you can have the Sprite Zone where families can come and watch. You can have a section carved out for families, completely opposite the section where you can have it for the people who want to get just plastered because they're in their 20s. It's such a tough question. I think the thing is people believe the CFL hasn't been trying with stuff like this. Well, they had a flag football league. What happened to that? Well, it ran for a couple of years, and I honestly don't know the answer to that. It probably cost them money they didn't have to spend. Everything is it costs money to do. And to another extent, I think when people say, if people have a problem with what the CFL is doing to attract young people, they miss what's being done on the team level. There are 9 teams that are actively reaching out to their provinces and their cities. The Saskatchewan Roughriders, they can't stop having guys come in and say, I want to go do some outreach. I want to go up north. I want to be running this camp in my hometown in Saskatoon. I want to be here. I want to be out talking to kids. I want to tell them my life lessons. I wanted to get them to love football. When we think of the CFL, I think we put it all on the league office in Toronto to be doing this stuff and that ignores the fact that here are 9 clubs, 9 independent businesses, semi-independent businesses that are out doing that stuff and reaching out to their community. Because it's great to have the CFL tagged onto it, but person to person is just so much better. And kids will probably forever tell stories of, oh man, I met the Riders long snapper Jorgen Hoos one day at my school in northern Saskatchewan, and it affects me greatly to this day, 30 years later. Like there are going to be those stories. So I think everybody could do more, but one of the big ones for me is this comes with a price attached to it. And to think about that now, outreach and growing the game for the very base roots and supporting football, it's going to be expensive. And frankly, I mean, there are other groups that do this stuff. To say it's not being done, to put it all in the CFL, one, I think is unfair to the CFL, and it certainly benefits them, but I think it's unfair to them. And 2, I think it ignores the work of tens of thousands of other people in our country who are helping to grow football at the very base level.
You talk about that reaching out in the community kind of thing. Is that another reason? Do you think there's so much divisiveness? Because this seems like a very when it seems like all of these teams are owned by the fans, not necessarily on paper, but like they own the teams and they're a vital part of the community. Yeah. Is that another reason why you think the Canadians are so protective of this?
Oh, 100%. Like when I came here a couple of years ago to take the job doing Riders games, I knew what I was walking into, right? Like it's all green on Friday game nights and people are so excited. And I put out a call during one game later in the season, said, tell us where you're listening from. Boom, Australia, boom, Denmark, boom, every corner of the province, boom, every province in Canada. Wow, this Saskatchewan. The first and only time my wife and I ever went to Mexico. We were it wasn't the best resort, so I wouldn't recommend it going forward. But we're in Puerto Vallarta, and we go down to the pool the first morning. Boom, someone had planted a Saskatchewan Roughrider flag there. And we thought, Puerto Vallarta? Really? It reaches this far? They had their Saskatchewan Roughrider giant mugs for their all-day margaritas. There's a real reach and passion for it. And I think it's what they've known in a lot of cases. You hear a couple of the guys from the University of Regina who were drafted this year talk about, I grew up being a Rider fan. And now, 22, I'm going to the CFL. I've always been a Rider fan. He then got drafted by the Bombers, which I'm sure will cut at his core. But one of the things, and tell me what you guys think about this. I think that one of the main problems with the perception of this, it comes down to the very zero level of what condition do people think the CFL is in. I think you get people who are absolutely fighting like the XFL needs to bow to us. Oh no, the CFL is pooched, and it all comes back to what condition do they think the CFL is in? If you think the CFL is okay and can weather this pandemic and not having played for a season plus, I think you're on the side of, well, the XFL is going to need to really sell me on something. But if you are on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers posted a $7 million loss and teams might lose $60 to $80 million, according to Dan Ralph's report. You're on the side of, this has gotta happen. I think it's that base. None of us know what condition the CFL is truly in, and that leads us to a lot of these arguments and a lot of these fights.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, we've always said, from the beginning that, the XFL is obviously struggling from a lack of lineage in history, right? That the CFL has. And I think when we had Rob Vanson on last week, I think I was saying, the XFL gets glossed over a lot with, The Rock's going to come in and save it, or look what Vince did, or look at all this stuff. At a fundamental level, the 2020 XFL was about, like you said, building those community ties, right? Doing fan events. I mean, we went to all the Seattle Dragons events and, met Jim Zorn and met the players and met, these things, when we picked our season tickets, you had the opportunity to, to go in, sit where your seat would be. These things that, I don't have the thousands of dollars to pay for like Seahawks season tickets, right? But I do have the $500 or whatever it was. I mean, we were front row 50-yard line for the games, right? But wow. it was that fan engagement, right, that I think is not dissimilar from what you're saying that the CFL is doing and what they need to do more of, right? I mean, I think both of these leagues, we look at 3 downs and we look at, Vince and he hate me and all this stuff, but what gets lost really is fundamentally a grassroots grown league on both sides that needs to be, do better at.
And I mean, everybody kind of understands that whatever version the CFL-XFL thing happens, or if the XFL ends up going it alone, you're going to build it from the ground up. You're going to go to the grassroots. You're going to do community outreach in these places. 2, you're going to have real ties to gambling, but that's a whole other deal. But yeah, you need to let people see that these are human beings. And sure, it's not the top level of football, but we accept the not top level of football so many times in our lives that this one shouldn't be particularly difficult. Okay, NCAA isn't the NFL. We still watch NCAA. CFL's not. I love the CFL. Youth sports football, our college football is not the CFL, which is not the NFL, but we still love our youth sports. I was a terrible high school football player. People came to watch that, even though it wasn't youth sports or the CFL or the NFL. We embrace the things that aren't the top level for different reasons, and I absolutely think there's room to go. And I mean, you guys are an example of that. Of like how many Seattle Seahawks games can you see for $500 from the 50-yard line? Like one quarter and then get the hell out. Like, come on. Yeah.
You talked about we don't really know what kind of trouble the CFL is in. To that point, if the CFL isn't in trouble, like some people believe it's not in trouble, they're putting the blinders on. Why even pick up that phone call from the XFL at that point?
That's exactly the point I made from day one on the SportsCage. There were so many things on that very first day that I couldn't quite process and led me to, the CFL must be in real trouble. If you're not in real trouble, why are you talking to them at all? Why aren't you just plowing through it and going ahead on this alone? Why would you make an announcement to them? Why had you been talking to them for 8 months since the Rock and Company took this over? Why did TSN, the broadcaster here in Canada, the CFL, put out a statement on the day the CFL announced they were having discussions with the XFL? Why did the XFL put off its season? There's so many things and so many pieces of circumstantial evidence that lead me to believe the CFL is in real financial, maybe not exactly dire straits, but like we mentioned Winnipeg. Winnipeg's the one of the 3 publicly owned clubs that has put out its financial statement for the year, and they posted a $7 million loss, which was $7 million, but they didn't make a payment for their stadium either. So is it really more like 10.5? Plus they got government support. So whatever it is, they lost $7 million versus a less than $1 million profit the year before. That's a long time to dig out of that hole. That's a long time to dig out of that hole. So to me, I take all the circumstantial evidence. I look at it. I listen to the people that I've talked to, and I think the CFL is in real trouble. So I then am on the side of, they're talking to the XFL because they need help in a bad way. Whether that's exactly how it is, I don't know, but that's where the evidence that I see leads me to.
Yeah, that's kind of my point too. So, I had asked you, Spring League kicks off tonight. So Brian Woods is their CEO. He's been on the show to promote that. And, we had talked with him a couple weeks ago. Back in the last year, he had approached the CFL and said, hey, why don't you guys come down? You can play in the States. We can set up a bubble, all these things. And they said no. I've heard they laughed him off, variety of reasons, right? But the point was that last year, and not that Brian is nearly, or the Spring League is nearly the level of the XFL, but the Spring League helped the XFL develop their rule systems going into last year. I mean, they're big enough that there could have been some sort of ideal worked out, right? And the fact that the CFL said we don't need that last year and now answer the call this year, I mean, it is just something to keep in mind that there's a history of different entities reaching out with different results to the CFL, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think everybody could probably use, everybody that's not the NFL could probably use some help in this time, and you try to figure out, well, if you're the CFL, what can they do for me? What can I do for them? And then figure it out. I don't know if that's connected to, well, we want to focus on the XFL thing, or they didn't see value there, or it just was the wrong day. I'm not sure what that would have been, but yeah, the CFL is definitely looking for some ways forward. I think we can all infer from what's been happening.
Realistically, what's your I guess what do you think is going to happen this season? How many games?
So the plan is to start August 5th and play 14 games. They've moved the Grey Cup back by 3 weeks. So to play essentially 14 games and 3 rounds of playoffs over a 19-week span. I think from a player perspective, they could do that. That's not out of line with what they've done. From a player health perspective, they could get that done. In Canada, where Ontario won't reopen until May 21st, to me, you kind of have to take August 5th and work back about 8 weeks and say, this is the day in which we have to say go or no go on August 5th. So I'm watching for very early in June, the CFL to go, yes, let's go, because guys will then pour across the border. Do they have to be vaccinated? I got to get my vaccine. I got to secure a place in Regina so I can work for the Riders. Boop, boop, boop. There's so much that has to happen. You got to fire up the marketing side. You got to fire up this side and the business. Let's go. Let's get our people in there. So I put those together. I think, well, in Saskatchewan here where the Riders play, you can't go visit your friends, right? You're supposed to keep to your own household. That's not great for going to see a football game with 8,000 people or however many they'll allow in. They've got the very first level of government support saying, yes, your plan for players to play players is great, but we still need to work on your plan for fans to come in. I'm struggling to think that August 5th is the day that which it will actually start. I don't have anything to back that up concrete. It's just a feeling that August 5th, it was a great day to put out there, but I don't think they're going to hit it. Honestly, I think it probably ends up being very early September. And if it's a half a season, 9 games plus the 3 playoff games that they've put out, I think 9 is probably more what, if I had to lay money, I'd probably say it's closer to 9 than 14.
We have a note in the show this week. They sent out the Players Association, send out another note, hey, we're still working through all this. I mean, are they just doing business as usual? Does that make you pause more when they're still saying like, hey, we don't know August 5th? Or does that kind of coincide with what you think?
I think it's probably in line with what the Players Association should be doing, right? When the CFL put out the date for August 5th, the CFL Players Association sent out a note that essentially said, don't quit your current jobs right now just because there's a date. That wasn't the exact wording, but that was the tenor. Hey, if you've got a job right now, you should probably hold on to that, because there's still so much that is uncertain here. And you're spanning 6 provinces to play the game, each one which has their own different health regulations. I think the CFLPA doing that, I think, is just prudent and the best thing for their players, as opposed to indicative necessarily of anything that they believe about August 5th.
I wanted to ask, it came out today, draft numbers down 20% from last year. Now, I know that last year was one of the highest that they had with, I believe last year was like 73,000 had watched a draft. That was the highest in many years. This year, it's down 20%. I think it's like 56,000 I have in my notes for today. What does that tell you? That, here we are, we're getting ready. Obviously, the CFL is in the news more than it's ever been with the XFL talks and everything else, and the draft numbers are still down 20%.
I don't put a ton into CFL draft numbers because, one, they didn't play last year versus the NFL. I mean, the NFL's draft was, oh man, here's some superstars and this storyline about what's going to happen at number 3. I think the third pick was the most bet on draft pick ever, who was going to go number 3. And I saw someone put out online yesterday that it was more than it was gambled on the entire CFL all last year. Like, number 3 pick, there was incredible drama about that horrible, terrible, idiotic Mac Jones rumor. Oh, they love Mac Jones. Come on, what are we doing here? Let's not pretend. So I don't take a ton from the CFL's draft numbers because they didn't play. And the thing is, it's where the CFL gets its Canadian kids from, but you get 0 quarterbacks from there. Your star players aren't coming from the CFL draft. The star players in the CFL, the sexy positions are generally are generally taken by Americans, right? So they're done through this system, their negotiation list system, which is very obscured and private. And I mean, we have our quarterbacks and we have our star receivers. It's interesting. I don't know if the CFL draft is ever going to be a really great big TV event because you're not getting superstars. I think people can't wait to see Jamar Chase back with his old college teammate in Cincinnati at number 5. Oh my God, this guy's going to kill it. I think there are a certain sect of people that go, oh man, that Jalen Phillips at 18 is going to absolutely murder some people if he's healthy. This is going to be phenomenal, right? They're so not to mention getting sunshine from, remember, the Titans at number 1 turns Jacksonville on its ear, right? Like, there's just so much immediate impact and immediate stardom. Trevor Lawrence has been a star for 3 years already, like a almost A-level sports star for 3 years already. That's who the NFL has in its draft. Our draft of Canadians is not the same stardom. Jake Burt, who went number 1 overall to Hamilton out of Boston College, might turn out to be a phenomenal Hall of Fame level CFL player, but it just cannot possibly be as sexy as the NFL draft. So I don't take a ton from the year-to-year ratings of the CFL. I'm just happy to see super smart people talking about football on my TV again. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, because that's good to have your perspective, and obviously we'll talk with Connor too, because I see that and I'm alarmed, but that's why we bring on experts so we can ask about that. But I mean that, right? Because these narratives come about, and I don't know. I mean, the NFL had 12 million people watch the night 1 of the draft, so I mean, it is just something that obviously is alarming to us.
Well, just think about the picks that kind of turned the whole draft. Like, everybody was waiting for number 3 in the NFL draft because we've been browbeaten with Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Mac Jones or Trey Lance at that number 3 pick. They're so great at creating the drama in that. And when you're in the Canadian draft, okay, we're filling our guard, center guard, our field wide receiver, defensive tackle, safety, and another position. The last time, like, who's the last defensive tackle that went number 1 overall in the NFL draft? Like, was it Dan Wilkinson back in the day? Like, it's been a long time. Last defensive tackle. Yeah. Sorry, Paul, I didn't hear you there.
I'm trying to think of the last defensive tackle to be taken overall number 1.
It might have been Wilkinson way back in the 90s, right? It's just the priorities for and maybe it's a fault of the Canadian game that we would dive into if we had a full hour or two, but Canadians get shoehorned into less sexy positions in the Canadian Football League. So the draft is set up to be not the viewing event that the NFL is, just by the nature of how Canadians are used in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, which
technically it's Myles Garrett, 2017 for the Browns.
Well, he was a defensive end though, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
I'm trying to, but yeah, like defensive tackle isn't the sexiest position. Like if it wasn't for Aaron Donald or J.J. Watt when he played mostly more on the interior, we kind of like Vince Wilfork. If Vince Wilfork went number 1 in the draft, we would all had we'd have been just raging about that. Oh my God, I can't believe this guy's amazing, right? It's not as sexy as the skilled positions.
Those are all my bad.
I guess our last question for you today, because like I said, I feel like we could, this deep dive of why the Canadians not. I mean, this is like a whole can of worms. But here on the show, covering CFL in the world, all these things, all the XFL, everything. What do you want to see come from all of this ideal pie in the sky?
Pie in the sky. Honestly, if I had my druthers, I would love to see the CFL be able to continue as it is with 9 teams and the hope of a 10th team out on the East Coast in Halifax. I would love that to come back into reality because I think COVID has really probably set Halifax back quite a while. What government wants to help fund a stadium in this time. I'd love to see it be a 10-team all-Canadian CFL with at least its current commitment to Canadian players. You have to have 7 starting every game. I would love to see that continue. I would absolutely. My dream is to have it continue just the way it is, honestly, where we get these guys the NFL has looked past and they become stars in our league. And I'll tell my kids about Brian Burnham, even though Americans may well not remember Brian Burnham. He's an American player who I would step over my own mom to shake Brian Burnham's hand the way he plays the game. Right? That's what I want. I want Canadians. The Canadian running back Andrew Harris, who gets in there and makes me go, God, that guy didn't even go to university. He's one of us, and he's killing this league. This is fantastic. I want that. I want everything to stay exactly as it is, and the business people can figure out better how to improve things. That said, I don't think it can. But honestly, that would be my dream. I want every kid to grow up thinking, I could play in the CFL one day. I could play for this team in green. I could be a rider. I could be like Dan Clark. I could be the next Brendan Labatt. I would love that.
But then what do you think is going to happen then?
That's a real good question. I just believe there is some sort of mixture of CFL and XFL. I think it's coming. I don't know. I don't want to put the term merger on it or the XFL Pac-Man eats the CFL. I just think there's some sort of mixture where the CFL brings its 9 dedicated fan bases to an XFL, which brings, potentially attention and revenue that the CFL desperately needs. I think they put out a wager on Bodog. It was, will a CFL team play an XFL team in 2022? And I immediately took yes. I took yes because I just believe it's going to happen. I wish it didn't have to be this way, but money problems before the pandemic plus the pandemic equals a lot of options we didn't have to consider before. If you're trying to save your own life, how many of your limbs are you willing to hack off to save your own life? If you had gangrene pouring up your arms, well, they might be the chance they're the gangrenous body that they just got to go. Well, okay, that was nice, but I want our people, I want our Canadians. As the commissioner of the CFL, I want people to experience the game that I played and was drafted number 2 overall at. So I think the CFL looks drastically different if we talk a year from now.
Very good stuff. Derek Taylor, voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders and host of the Sports Cage. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We really appreciate it.